It is July 20th, 2026, and at some point in the last 90 minutes, every cruise missile storage facility and launch site the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps maintained on Greater Tunb Island stopped existing. The island had been one of the IRGC's most strategically positioned forward military installations, sitting at the western entrance to the Strait of Hormuz, loaded with cruise missile storage bunkers and launch sites capable of reaching any commercial or military vessel attempting to transit the passage, protected by layered coastal defense systems, operated as the IRGC's frontline weapons platform at the most contested maritime choke point on the planet. This was not a secondary installation held in reserve. It was the kind of forward asset a military force places at the exact point where it intends to project maximum threat, 90 minutes in and out. Precision munitions through the doors of the storage bunkers, secondary explosions as the weapon stockpiles caught and detonated, coastal defense systems taken apart in the same package, and then nothing left on that island resembling the military infrastructure that had been there before the operation began. Central Command released the footage publicly. The IRGC reportedly discovered what had happened to their forward position when they checked their own telegram feed, not from a defensive engagement they mounted against the incoming strike, not from a radar picture they built as the package arrived, but from a social media application after it was already over. That 90-minute window is not just a tactical achievement. It is the entire strategic message of this campaign compressed into a single operational fact. This is what American military precision and speed look like once the restraint has been removed. The choice of Greater Tunb Island as the target, the speed of the operation, and the public release of the footage immediately after is the U.S. military communicating something specific about where this conflict is going. But to understand the full weight of what just happened, and why the sequencing of the past 5 nights tells you exactly what comes next, you need to understand the construct the IRGC built to dominate the strait, and why this operation did not just destroy an island installation, it began systematically dismantling the architecture that construct depends on. Let's back all the way up, because this campaign did not begin with strike packages and carrier aviation. It began with Iran making a deliberate operational choice in the 7 days before the first American munition fell on Iranian territory. In that window, the IRGC attacked 7 commercial ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. 7 vessels, 7 days. The people aboard those ships were not military personnel. They were civilian mariners, and nearly a dozen of them are now dead, missing at sea or injured. The IRGC's framing for these attacks invoked regulatory authority over transit through a waterway international law designates as open passage for commercial shipping of all nations. That framing, applied while civilian crews were being fired on, constructs exactly the kind of record a military adversary with a legal and strategic case to make will use with precision. That is the trigger for 5 consecutive nights of American strikes, a reimposed naval blockade, and a targeting list that began with missile batteries and radar sites and is now moving toward the infrastructure layer powering the Iranian military economy. The confirmed operational picture across 5 nights: 2 U.S. carrier strike groups in the region, roughly 20 surface combatants enforcing the blockade against vessels transiting to or from Iranian ports, fighter aircraft, naval assets, loitering AI-guided attack drones, and the full spectrum of electronic warfare capability running against Iranian targets every night, without a single American aircraft lost, and without a single operational pause. More than 160 IRGC boats and maritime assets confirmed struck. Greater Tunb Island's cruise missile infrastructure gone. Coastal defense systems around the strait's approaches systematically targeted. Small power plants on the islands already hit, read as a preview of what a mainland energy infrastructure phase would look like. The IRGC has meanwhile claimed American aircraft were destroyed at Al Asad Air Base, F-15s, F-16s, and F-35s supposedly taken out on the ground, with no verified evidence supporting any of it. Central Command has confirmed 0 aircraft losses and 0 operational pauses. That gap between what the IRGC has been saying and what the confirmed documented record shows is not a minor reporting discrepancy. It is the distance between an organization managing its internal narrative under pressure and the actual outcome of the engagements it is describing. Then the president went on Fox News and named what comes next, stating that unless Iran comes to the negotiating table, power plants and bridges are the next phase, and confirming that the United States is actively monitoring the underground facility referred to publicly as Pickaxe Mountain, suspected of supporting Iran's nuclear program, warning it will be targeted if necessary. Read that sequence of statements carefully, not as improvised commentary, but as a specific compellence strategy operating in full public view and designed to operate there. Compellence is the strategic logic of using the demonstrated credibility of a threatened action to force behavioral change before the action itself is taken. The active version of deterrence, forcing an adversary to do something rather than merely preventing it from acting. The power plant and bridge warning contains every element that makes a compellence strategy operationally effective. a specific action threatened, a specific condition under which it will not be taken, a specific timeline creating a decision window, and a demonstrated capability making the threat credible rather than rhetorical. Greater Tunb Island in 90 minutes is the credibility proof that the threat is not rhetorical. There is a specific reason this warning was delivered publicly on a major broadcast rather than through diplomatic back channels. A private warning can be denied, reframed, or managed through the information gap between what was said and what a regime tells its domestic audience was said. A public warning that Iranian intelligence will have transcribed and analyzed within hours cannot be managed the same way. The Iranian leadership receives it with no possibility of claiming the message was unclear. The Iranian population receives it and understands exactly what is coming for their power, infrastructure, and transportation network, generating pressure on the regime from a direction its military operations cannot address. Every Gulf partner, every shipping nation, every multilateral institution watching this conflict receives the warning alongside the operational record already established, providing the diplomatic context that makes the next phase internationally legible before it begins. Making the announcement publicly is itself a kind of operation, an information campaign running simultaneously with a kinetic one, each reinforcing the other's credibility with a different audience. Now, to what Admiral Brad Cooper put on the official record, because it may be the analytically most important statement of the entire week, and it did not come from strike footage. It came from the commander of Central Command, a 4-star admiral, in an official public release, stating that over the preceding 7 days, Iran had intentionally targeted civilians across the region by attacking 7 commercial ships, resulting in nearly a dozen civilian crew members killed, missing, or injured. Read that again, because that word intentionally is not accidental. A military officer of that rank does not insert it into an official statement about civilian casualties without understanding precisely what it does. Intentionality is the legal dividing line in international humanitarian law between conduct defensible under the laws of armed conflict and conduct constituting deliberate targeting of protected civilians. When the commander of Central Command states publicly that Iran intentionally targeted civilian mariners, he is not offering tactical analysis. He is constructing a legal record, building the evidentiary foundation that justifies the current level of response and provides the internationally legible justification for the next phase. Every shipping nation with a vessel attacked, every government with citizens killed or injured on commercial ships in the Strait, every institution monitoring compliance with maritime and armed conflict law all received in one official statement a public assertion by the senior U.S. commander in the region that the attacks were not incidental but intentional. That statement is the diplomatic and legal architecture the power plant strikes, the bridge strikes, and any operation against the nuclear-linked facility will rest on. The platform architecture executing the Greater Tunb Island operation shows what the next phase actually looks like from inside the cockpit and inside an IRGC command center. The EA-18G Growler, the electronic warfare platform that shapes the environment before anything else happens, carries no ordnance for ground targets. Its function is controlling the electromagnetic spectrum, the frequencies radar systems emit on, that communications travel between command nodes and field units on. In a jamming posture, it suppresses and overwhelms those frequencies until the systems depending on them stop functioning as designed. The Iranian radar that should track inbound contacts shows clutter it cannot resolve into coherent tracks. The link between an IRGC command center and a coastal missile battery degrades to garbled transmissions or silence. Inside a command center operating in that environment, the result is static. Operators cannot see what is coming clearly, cannot communicate reliably, cannot coordinate a response because coordination requires information flow that has been actively degraded by a platform difficult to localize, since the Growler shifts its own electromagnetic signature continuously. Simultaneously, E-2 Hawkeye radar aircraft off the carriers provide the American strike package a complete, real-time picture of the entire operational area. One side of this engagement has clarity, the other has noise. That asymmetry is structural dominance that leaves the IRGC's integrated air defense effectively blind at the moment the strike package executes. Into that blinded environment go the F-16 Wild Weasels, tasked with suppression of enemy air defenses, flying directly into the threat envelope carrying the AGM-88 Harm, a high-speed anti-radiation missile that homes on the electromagnetic emissions of an active radar without needing any other targeting input. The moment an Iranian operator activates a radar to try to see through the jamming, that emission becomes the targeting signal for a harm already airborne and tracking it. That is the trap Wild Weasel doctrine creates. You cannot defend against the incoming package without the information an active radar provides, but activating the radar is the act that destroys it. Then come the F-15E Strike Eagles with the strike package itself, carrying precision-guided munitions, including 5,000-pound bunker-penetrating bombs designed to punch through hardened concrete before detonating, and satellite-guided bombs directed at confirmed coordinates against the fixed cruise missile storage bunkers on Greater Tunb Island. The The secondary explosions from stored missiles detonating as the strikes land are the physical confirmation that the munitions found what they were aimed at. AI-guided loitering attack drones address the category of target aircraft cannot efficiently engage across the island-dense geography of the Strait's approaches, dozens of small dispersed missile launcher sites, fast attack boat staging areas, and communications nodes positioned specifically to blend into terrain rather than present as obvious installations. A network of autonomous drones, sharing targeting data with each other, can reach the small, austere positions an aircraft cannot approach closely enough to prosecute efficiently, engaging multiple dispersed positions across multiple islands in the same window. Central Command's target selection has been tracking a specific category of Iranian weapon with notable consistency: the C-802 anti-ship cruise missile, an active radar-guided system with a range of roughly 120 kilometers, and a sea-skimming flight profile that complicates intercept by systems calibrated for higher altitude threats. It is the weapon the IRGC has deployed most consistently against surface targets in the Strait, and it sits behind the attacks on commercial vessels that form the legal foundation Admiral Cooper's statement rests on. What is being eliminated is every demonstrated firing position, storage facility, and coastal battery that has shown the operational ability to target vessels on the water, a systematic elimination of the specific weapons proven in actual use against the specific category of civilian targets underpinning the legal record now on file. A larger commercial vessel has also reportedly been found sunk in the approaches to Bandar Abbas, its circumstances unconfirmed, cause not definitively established, though a vessel resting on the bottom near Iran's primary port city, in the current context, is not something either side will treat as unrelated to the broader picture. 3 pressure tracks are running against the Islamic Republic simultaneously, and the Greater Tunb Island operation is the clearest demonstration yet of how they interact. The military track is not simply accumulating destroyed targets. It is demonstrating that the information dominance created by the Growler and the Hawkeye, combined with the Wild Weasel turning every radar activation into a targeting event, means the IRGC cannot construct an effective picture of what is approaching before a strike package is already inside the engagement window. Greater Tunb's defenders could not see the package coming, and finding out what happened through telegram is not a one-time intelligence failure. It is the repeatable consequence of operating inside a degraded information environment against a force built specifically to maintain that degradation. The economic track compounds with each additional night, the blockade closing revenue at the port level, the destruction of missile storage reducing the IRGC's ability to threaten the shipping. Any future recovery depends on the targeting of island power plants, previewing what targeting mainland generation would do to the facilities powering missile production and weapon systems. The psychological track runs through the same information asymmetry. An operator sitting inside jammed communications, unable to build the situational picture coordination requires, while the gap between the IRGC's public claims and observable reality becomes visible to the Iranian domestic audience in ways the regime cannot fully manage. The most analytically significant point about who is actually running this conflict on the Iranian side is this: the commanders controlling the Strait of Hormuz are the effective power center of the Islamic Republic right now, not the parliament, not the diplomatic apparatus signaling willingness to negotiate. Those commanders answer through their own institutional chain to a different level of decision-making than the political figures who speak for the Islamic Republic diplomatically. That creates a structural problem the public compellence strategy has to navigate. If the decision to negotiate rests with operational commanders rather than political figures, the message has to travel through a channel not designed to transmit it efficiently. A parliamentary speaker can signal willingness to return to the table, but a commander convinced that continued operations serve the IRGC's institutional survival better than a negotiated outcome. Constraining its autonomy does not receive that signal through the parliamentary channel and is not bound by it. The response to 5 nights of strikes confirms this. Not a coherent institutional decision to escalate or de-escalate, but fragmented outputs, public claims of victories the record does not support. Continued missile launches being intercepted at near total rates, and a shift toward the residual proxy tactics the IRGC falls back on when its primary tools are degraded, hidden ballistic launchers emerging from coastal concealment to fire and retreat, fast attack boats dispersing to secondary positions, proxy actions through Iraq and Yemen sustaining the appearance of offensive capacity without exposing core infrastructure to the next strike. The honest strategic assessment rests on one phrase worth stating directly. Degraded does not mean disarmed. The IRGC has lost the cruise missile infrastructure on Greater Tunb Island, had over 160 maritime assets struck, had its air defense network systematically targeted for 5 nights, had its island positions reached by drones that aircraft alone could not efficiently prosecute. All of that is real and has materially reduced what can be brought to bear in the short term. But the IRGC still has ballistic missiles hidden in coastal positions that blend into terrain until they emerge to fire, still has fast attack boats that dispersed and will operate from new locations, still has proxy networks in Iraq and Yemen untouched by any strikes inside Iranian territory, and still has underground facilities that surface-optimized munitions have not been aimed at. Degradation is not elimination, and this is not the force it was before 5 nights of sustained strikes, but it remains a force with residual capability that will produce more engagements before this campaign reaches any endpoint. Pickaxe Mountain is the structural risk that changes the character of what comes next, qualitatively different from power plants and bridges because it is not a surface installation that can be photographed and prosecuted through a standard targeting chain. It is an underground facility suspected of supporting Iran's nuclear program, hardened, buried at depth, engineered specifically to survive the category of strikes that have processed IRGC surface infrastructure for 5 consecutive nights, requiring next-generation penetrating munitions built with the mass and detonation timing to punch through multiple meters of reinforced concrete before reaching what they are meant to destroy, a category above the bunkers already struck on Greater Tunb Island. Employing that class of weapon against a nuclear-associated underground facility crosses into a domain involving the International Atomic Energy Agency and international nuclear law, legal and diplomatic frameworks activated regardless of whether the facility is weapons-related or support infrastructure, and reactions from China and Russia that nuclear-adjacent targeting generates in ways bridge and power plant strikes simply do not. The president named that target publicly, confirmed it is being monitored and assessed as connected to Iran's nuclear program, and stated the condition under which it will be struck, the top rung of the compellence ladder made explicitly visible so every audience, the IRGC, Iran's political leadership, its international partners, and the wider world understands exactly how far the escalation path extends and what it looks like at its furthest confirmed point. Right now, the commanders who actually control the Strait of Hormuz are making a calculation the rest of the regime's power structure cannot make for them. The 90-minute operation against Greater Tunb Island was proof of concept, and 5 nights of strikes with 0 American losses and 0 operational pauses demonstrated that the package executing these operations is not being meaningfully degraded by anything the IRGC can currently bring against it. The power plants have been named publicly with a timeline. The bridges have been named with a condition attached. The nuclear-linked facility has been named by the president with a warning about what happens if that condition is not met. The legal architecture rests on an official 4-star statement that used the word intentionally to describe attacks on civilian mariners, a word every international humanitarian law framework, every shipping nation, and every multilateral institution understands the implications of. The compellence window is open, timed, and built on demonstrated capability rather than rhetoric, and the IRGC's own operators on Greater Tunb Island found out about the loss of their forward missile infrastructure by checking a phone after it was already over. That is what open season looks like in practice, not a declaration, a demonstration repeated over 5 consecutive nights with 0 losses on one side and confirmed infrastructure destruction on the other. The next decision belongs to the commanders in the south, the ones who control the strait, the ones who ordered the attacks on 7 ships in 7 days, the ones whose forward position on Greater Tunb Island no longer exists. They are the audience this is addressed to. They are the ones whose decision determines whether the power stays on.